Our next presenter is Dr. Joanne Stroud. I'm not going to read her whole introduction again, but we do know her as beloved inspiration and prime mover of this event that's been going on for 7 years. She's a founding fellow of the Dallas Institute, editor of the Gaston Bachelard series. In 2017, she was awarded the Distinguished Alumni Award from the University of Dallas for her sustained and distinguished accomplishment and contribution, one of the highest honors that the university gives. So Joanne, please come and speak to us.
I want to take one moment to say that Simi Ali was to be here today and to talk about the horses of the Iliad, and it would have been a very interesting comparison for you two to share it with one another. And another very close friend, it was Tom Moore. 2 years ago, he doesn't like conferences. I'm sure all of you who know him know he resists coming to conferences, but he always sends us his very best wishes. And he allowed us to put his talk on the obsidian stone from the conference on alchemy on YouTube, and it has gotten thousands of responses. So I'm taking my talk today from James Hillman's conversation with Tom Moore, which is chapter 12 in the volume. And Hillman asks the crucial question for psychologists: why are animals so important? James gives us his response to this question. In most societies, the animals were once gods. They weren't representations of gods, they were the gods. There was a divinity in the animal. I think we still feel this, especially in dreams. Now, continuing with this analysis, Hillman explains, animals were gods because they were eternal. That absolute perfection, that the animal is always the same, is a divine quality. But in our culture, the animal is less than human. Animals awaken the image. Now, that was part of a quotation from page 181. But animals awaken this image of eternity. Any of it, and I think all of us have probably had experience with pets. They have no sense of timing. They forget that time has passed. I've always Odysseus' dog in the Odyssey that recognizes him after 20 years of being away. But we have to ask ourselves, why have animals become so debased in our postmodern world that many species are slowly disappearing? Are we engaged in demeaning them in order to elevate our own importance in the chain of being? Is our attitude of superiority the consequence of the concept in the Bible of human beings being of a higher level of consciousness and intelligence, and as a consequence being given the charge of naming the animals? Or is this disdain culturally related, a Western attitude of ego dominance focused on its own prominence? Or could the superior physical prowess of animals, their being able to see and hear better, could that even be a hidden source of envy? Or could the oppression of animals have something else to teach us? By turning around to the imaginal perspective of the animal in Hillman's discussion in Culture and the Animal Soul, Hillman comes up with a novel question. What is the willingness on the part of the animal to enter domestication, to be bred, hunted, and trapped, to be subjected to experimentation, to be a beast of burden, to yield to aesthetic displays, skins, horns, feathers, and shells, to partake with its sacrificial slaughter in rituals that serves the gods. In other words, is there a logical explanation why animals are so compliant? They certainly have characteristics that are the cause of wonder. What most fascinates me is the connection that animals forge with humans and their incredible powers of reading human intentions. Anyone who shares life with a pet animal is surprised how intuitive they are. In Animal Presences, Hillman makes this startling observance. We don't know how they perceive us, how they pick up our vibes. Indeed, we can only marvel that they read us so accurately. Animals sense your fear of them. They also know who loves them and who doesn't. Hillman in Dream Animals, the book of the lectures that with Margot's animal paintings, makes this observation. We too display a psychic image. We can be read as a horse reads its rider, even as you walk to the stable, as the lions in the circus ring read their trainer. His mood, his pace, are each an open book to the animal eye, especially to our household pets, who can call you on your state of mind or soul before you have any notion of it. They were the first psychoanalysts. I agree with that. We're taken in by animals that we choose for pets, or they choose us. It's often said that cats choose their owners, and was certainly true in my case. Now for the corny or sentimental side of the talk. Bear with me, please. There's Katouche. Now, Katouche was born in the gutter of my house. Mother dropped 3 kittens, and she was orphaned when the animal shelter took away her mother and her sisters. She was totally afraid of humans until Natasha started trying to domesticate her last October. Now, we can all, Margot, Klaus, Natasha, we can all testify about how affectionate she is. She sits on the do you know what a brisker is? She sits on a brisker behind me and leaps into my lap when I'm reading the New York Times in the morning. She startles me by flying over my shoulder to watch Masterpiece Theater on Sunday night. Katouche lets me know that she will never be entirely domesticated. If I have dinner guests on Sunday night and they don't pay enough attention to her or tell her how beautiful she is, she punishes me by climbing high on the roof and refusing to come down and sleep in the kitchen, as she usually does. Or maybe it's just that she's mad not to get to watch Poldark. I often think James sent her as a messenger to me. I've learned so much from her. Now, Billy Collins, who's one of my favorite poets, wrote in his last book of poetry, The Rain in Portugal, a poem called Lucky Cat. It's a law as immutable as one's governing bodies in motions and bodies at rest, that a cat picked up will never stay in a place where you choose to set it down. I bet you'd be happy on the sofa, or this hammock, or this knitted throw pillow, or a few examples of the bets that you're bound to lose. The secret of winning, I have found, is never bet against the cat, but on the cat, preferably with another human being who, like the cat, who, unlike the cat, is likely to be carrying money. And I cannot think of a better time to thank our cat for her being, thus turning me into a consistent winner. She's a pure black one, quite impossible to photograph, and prone to disappearing into the night, or even into the thin shadows of noon. Such an amorphous blob of blackness is she. The only way to tell she's approaching is to notice the 2 little yellow circles of her eyes, then only one circle when she's walking away with her tail raised high. something like the lantern signal of Paul Revere, American silversmith, galloping patriot. Now, I've learned from Scooter, who's my Irish Russell grand dog, the way he picks up, I've learned many things from him too, the way he picks up when anyone is parting or trying to take him where he doesn't want to go. He hides under the sofa or he sulks. He has bilingual abilities. He understands commands in English or Spanish. He barks to go out, and when he's ready to come back inside. And I want to read another poem by Billy Collins. I first ran into Billy Collins at the Sun Valley Writers Conference, and we became friends. And he explained that this poem, called The Revenant, is about a spirit that comes back. Here the dog reveals what he thinks of his former master. Now, I'm not going to read this whole poem because there really isn't time, so I'm going to just paraphrase it a bit. I'm the dog you put to sleep. As you like to call the needle of oblivion, come back to tell you a simple thing. I never liked you, not one bit. I resented the way you moved, your lack of animal grace, the absurdity of your face. I would have run away, but I was too weak. I disliked your friends, and worse, your relatives. You always scratched me in the wrong place. And he's talking about being in paradise or heaven or something. Everyone here can read or write. The dogs in poetry, the cats and all others in prose. It's a lovely poem about Billy Collins has a great feel for animals. Now, in a serious vein, James Hillman validates the messenger character of animals. An animal, says the Zohar, is the highest grade of angel. Which specific kind of angel is the dog? Angels from Agalos in Greek are bearers of messages. What angelic message does the dog bear? This is Scooter in the Snow in Connecticut. What essential intelligence is embodied in that hairy coat behind those soft eyes and black muzzle of that angel we call a dog? I understand angelic essence to mean the deepest and highest intention that the animal brings into this world, offering the world necessary qualities specific to each kind of animal. This is the first importance of these creatures, each of them, all of them. Now I thought I had copied this part because I looked at it last night, but there's a whole section on this following page 151 about the difference between cats and, I thought it was in this one, but between cats and dogs. Cats being feminine and dogs being masculine. Yes, I could read it. Because I think I think you'll sort of recognize what he's saying. Cats and dogs tend to divide along a comfortable fault line in our thinking, male and female. So he said the cats bring with them something magical from far away, from Egypt, and the night, fundamentally heathen, pagan. There are no cats anywhere in the Bible. Cats seem to never be fully on our side. Will a cat heel, take a leash, sit up on haunches, or dance on command? They prefer to watch from a distance on high. A cat climbs a tree, a dog digs a hole. The way up and the way down are not the same. So I really want to talk about how intuitive animals are. Certainly birds have been through the ages look to for their prophetic attributes. I think all of us are familiar with the Gerald Manley Hopkins Wendover, in which the circling bird is a revelation of Christ's presence in the material world. L'Autrement, also, which is a favorite of Hillman's along with Bachelard, wrote much about animal energy. He said, a need to animalize is at the origins of imagination, whose first function is to create animal forms. Also, he said, an animal cry is the root of all poetic expression. Now, I know this group, I'm sure you know Bachelard, but if you don't, he was a favorite source of Hillman's, of the Dallas Institute's, and mine. Naturally, since we spent so many years, since Scott Dupree and I spent so many years translating his works from French, he was very, very well known in France. He was a philosopher of science, and what is so totally amazing is that his observation skills, instead of robbing the material world of its liveliness and essence, instead, Bachelard is able to give such sense of wonder and joy to the materiality of the world that I would highlight him to you if you don't know him already. He wrote profusely about poetic imagination and creativity. And here is a perfect example. He says, an image has a double reality, a psychological reality and a physical reality. It's through the image that the one who imagines and the thing imagined are most closely united. Now that comes from his book, Earth and Reveries of Repose, an essay on reveries of, but he wrote also on the reveries of will, which is the extroverted part of the world, of the element of the earth. Now, I also want you to see the Swan. I think this is one of Natasha's photographs of swans behind our house in Southampton. I love the reflection in the water, and I can always find something in the poetry of W.B. Yeats, as everybody who knows me knows, to buttress any truth. And though Hillman did not talk about swanness, Yeats often included the image of swans in his poetry. And that's perhaps because they were a constant presence at Lady Gregory's cool park where he often visited. In this one, Cool Park in Ballylee, 1931, in the second stanza, he wrote, a sudden thunder of the mounting swan. I turned about and looked where branches break the glittering reaches of the flooded lake. Another emblem there, the stormy white, but seemed a concentration of the sky. And like the soul, it sails into the sight, and in the morning gone, no man knows why. And it's so lovely that it sets to right which knowledge or lack had set awry. So arrogantly pure, a child might think it can be murdered with a spot of ink. And then another poem of Yeats that was always one of my favorites because it frightened me and stunned me, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it. So that in a way of doubling back to that time when the animals were God, I thought about this one, Leda and the Swan. And in this poem, Zeus takes the form of a swan to seduce a mortal. A sudden blow, the great wings beating still above the staggering girl. her thighs caressed by the dark webs, her nape caught in his bill. He holds her helpless breast upon his breast. How can those terrified, vague fingers push the feathered glory from her loosening thighs? And how can body, laid in that white rush, but feel the strange heart beating where it lies? A shudder in the loins engendered there, the broken wall, the burning roof and tower, and Agamemnon dead. Being so caught up, so mastered by the brute blood of the air, did she put on his knowledge with his power before the indifferent beak could let her drop. Now, when I first read that poem, it was, as I say, it shocked me. The gods, not only the gods' indifference, but the violence of the breaking through of the divine into the human plane. We all are part of the Christian tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition, and are used to thinking about divine coming into the human thing. But this presents it as a shock, as a blow. So in this poem, we're not engaged with an animal in a dream sequence, but instead in the experiential terror of an aggressive attack by an Olympian god in the form of a swan. Now, if you've ever confronted a swan on the shore, it's hard to believe that it's the same peaceful-looking creature that you just saw floating across a pond. The beached white animal seems much, much larger and makes sounds like a snake. The above coupling with Leda produced an animal egg from which were born Helen, for whom the Trojan War was fought, and Clytemnestra, who murdered her husband Agamemnon on his return from the Trojan War. Zeus was the progenitor par excellence. His progeny enlarged the family of Olympians: Athena by Metis, Apollo and Artemis by Leto, Dionysus by Semele, Ares, and Hephaestus by Hera with help or by herself, and possibly Aphrodite by Dione. He also populated the mortal plane with heroes. Although he angered Hera with his infidelities and became a laughingstock for taking whatever steps necessary to seduce his chosen one, including taking the form of a swan in the poem above, his appetites were not only for personal satisfaction, but for the purpose of destiny and history. Donald Cowan calls Zeus the generating principle that sustains history, magnifies it, and gives it form. Elaborating on this poem, Don Cowan has this to say: Yeats ponders the mystery of the engendering of Helen, the Trojan War, the fall of the great city, the triumph of the Achaeans, and the murder of their leader on his homecoming to Clytemnestra. In fact, all of the Greek civilization are contained in it. What is implied in the poetic imagination, then, we might say, is that the act itself is not a simple act of lust, but a movement toward the fulfillment of history. Did the woman who became the vessel for the divine seed of heroes and heroines have glimpses of her lover's knowledge in the act of lovemaking before the indifferent beak could let her drop? This is the phrase that shocks one's attention in the reference to the divine indifference. I would say that we are wary of animals because they carry a glimpse of the divine along with them. Thank you.